On the morning of March 14th, 1959, something happened at the Baikonur Cosmodrome that the Soviet Union would spend decades trying to erase from history. What began as another routine test in the space program became one of the most disturbing incidents ever documented in the pursuit of cosmic exploration. The official records from that day remain classified, but fragments of testimonies, hidden documents, and whispered accounts from technicians paint a picture so troubling that even today, former Soviet officials refuse to discuss it. The incident involved a man whose name was deliberately removed from all official documentation. In internal reports that survived the purges, he was referred to only as Cosmonaut Zero. No photographs exist of him in any archive. No family members have ever come forward to claim him. It was as if the Soviet space program had launched a ghost into the void, and when something went terribly wrong, they simply pretended he had never existed at all. The Baikonur Cosmodrome in 1959 was a sprawling complex of concrete and steel rising from the Kazakhstan steppe. Miles of endless grassland surrounded the launch facilities, creating an isolation so complete that the nearest settlement lay over 50 kilometers away. Workers lived in hastily constructed barracks, sleeping to the constant hum of generators and the distant rumble of rocket engines being tested. The facility operated under such secrecy that even the technicians working there knew only fragments of what they were building. Dr. Vladimir Petrov, chief engineer of the R-7 rocket program, had been at Baikonur since 1957. According to his personal notes, discovered during a renovation of the facility in 1966. The atmosphere in early 1959 was one of intense pressure and barely contained excitement. The Americans had recently launched their first satellite, and Premier Khrushchev was demanding results that would demonstrate Soviet superiority in space technology. Petrov wrote that the technicians worked 16-hour shifts, surviving on black tea and determination. The R-7 rockets towered over the launch complex, like metal monuments to human ambition, but everyone understood they were also potential instruments of destruction. A single miscalculation could turn the entire facility into a crater, and the nearest medical facility was hours away by truck. The winter of 1958 had been particularly harsh, with temperatures dropping below -40 degrees Celsius. Supply convoys often arrived days behind schedule, and the isolation began to affect the psychological state of the workers. Petrov noted in his diary that several technicians had requested transfers, citing strange dreams and an overwhelming sense of being watched by the vast emptiness surrounding the facility. In this environment of pressure, secrecy, and isolation, the Soviet space program conducted its most ambitious experiments. The official goal was to place a man in orbit around Earth, but according to fragmentary documents that surfaced years later, there were other objectives that were never recorded in any public archive. The man who would become known as Cosmonaut Zero arrived at Baikonur on February 28, 1959. According to the few surviving records, he was 28 years old, a former test pilot with an exceptional psychological profile for handling extreme stress. His real name was systematically removed from all documentation, but maintenance logs from that period reference someone with the initials ETM. Unlike the other cosmonauts in training, this individual was housed separately from the main barracks, in a small concrete building near the perimeter of the complex. Technicians who worked the night shift reported seeing lights in his quarters at all hours, and some claimed to hear what sounded like recordings of human voices played at different speeds, though no one could confirm what language was being spoken. The training regimen for Cosmonaut Zero differed significantly from standard protocols. While other test pilots underwent traditional physical conditioning and technical instruction, his program included psychological exercises that no one at the facility fully understood. Dr. Anya Volkov, a psychiatrist assigned to the space program, left behind notes suggesting that the training was designed to prepare him for extended periods of complete sensory isolation. According to her records, discovered in a sealed file cabinet in 1967, Dr. Volkov grew increasingly concerned about the psychological impact of the training. She wrote that Cosmonaut Zero displayed remarkable calm during exercises that typically cause severe anxiety in other subjects. But she noted something unsettling in his responses to standard psychological evaluation questions. His answers were technically correct, but lacked any emotional resonance, as if he were reciting memorized responses rather than expressing genuine thoughts. The weeks leading up to the launch were marked by unusual activity at the facility. Cargo planes arrived at irregular intervals, delivering equipment that was immediately transported to restricted areas of the complex. Workers reported being ordered to leave certain sections of the facility during specific hours, and temporary communication blackouts became routine. Even the senior engineers were excluded from meetings that took place in the administrative building. On March 10th, 4 days before the launch, a technician named Sergei Kozlov was performing routine maintenance on the R-7 rocket when he discovered modifications that were not present in any blueprint he had seen. According to his testimony, recorded during an internal investigation that was later classified, the capsule contained additional equipment that appeared to be recording devices, but their purpose was unclear. When he reported the discovery to his supervisor, he was reassigned to duties in a different part of the facility. The final preparations for the launch proceeded with mechanical precision, but several workers noted an atmosphere of tension that seemed disproportionate to a routine test flight. The launch was scheduled for dawn on March 14th, and the night before, Cosmonaut Zero was seen walking alone around the perimeter of the launch complex. A security guard later reported that he appeared to be speaking to himself, but was too far away to determine what he was saying. At approximately 5:30 in the morning on March 14th, 1959, the final checks were completed, and Cosmonaut Zero was sealed inside the capsule atop the R-7 rocket. The launch proceeded normally for the first 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Radio contact was maintained with the capsule, and telemetry data indicated all systems were functioning within expected parameters. Cosmonaut Zero's voice, transmitted back to Mission Control, was calm and professional as he reported his status and observations. At 4 minutes and 38 seconds after launch, something changed. The first indication of a problem came not from telemetry data, but from Cosmonaut Zero's voice. According to the mission transcript, which was classified immediately after the incident, his tone became noticeably different. He began reporting observations that did not match what tracking stations were recording about his position and altitude. He described seeing structures on the Earth's surface that should not have been visible from his trajectory, and mentioned lights in space that no other observation could confirm. Ground Control attempted to redirect his attention to standard mission protocols, but Cosmonaut Zero's responses became increasingly erratic. He reported that the capsule was not following its predicted flight path, despite telemetry data showing everything was normal. Most disturbing were his repeated references to voices that he claimed to be hearing inside the capsule, despite the fact that no other communication signals were being transmitted to him. The transcript shows that Mission Control became increasingly concerned as Cosmonaut Zero began responding to questions that no one had asked. His answers were technically accurate regarding his mission status, but he appeared to be engaged in conversations with someone else. When Ground Control specifically asked him to confirm that he was receiving their transmissions clearly, there was a long pause before he replied that he understood his instructions and would comply with the modified mission profile. No modified mission profile had been transmitted to him. At this point, the mission director ordered all radio communications to be recorded on multiple systems, and additional personnel were brought into the control room to monitor the situation. What they heard over the next 37 minutes would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. Cosmonaut Zero began providing detailed descriptions of what he claimed to observe from his position in space. He described the curvature of the Earth in terms that were consistent with his altitude, but then mentioned geographical features that were impossible to see from his location. He spoke of lights moving in patterns below him, and referenced structures that he claimed were clearly artificial but did not match any known installations. More troubling were his responses to instructions from ground control. He would acknowledge commands promptly and correctly, but his acknowledgements often included additional information that suggested he was receiving more complex instructions than what was being transmitted. When asked to explain these discrepancies, he would respond that he was following the mission parameters as briefed. But no such briefings had taken place. The recording equipment captured something else that was not immediately apparent to the personnel in mission control. During periods when Cosmonaut Zero was not speaking, sensitive microphones picked up what sounded like additional voices in the background of the transmission. The audio quality was poor, but analysis suggested multiple speakers, though their words were unintelligible. At 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight, Cosmonaut Zero reported that his capsule was beginning to deviate from its planned trajectory. Telemetry data showed no such deviation, but his descriptions of the Earth's surface visible below him no longer matched what ground tracking predicted he should be seeing. When Mission Control informed him that all tracking data indicated he was precisely on course, he responded that perhaps the ground equipment was experiencing interference. The most disturbing element of the transcript came at 8 minutes and 41 seconds after launch. Cosmonaut Zero's voice became noticeably calmer, and he began speaking in what the control room personnel later described as an unnaturally measured tone. He reported that he had established communication with another station and was receiving updated instructions for the completion of his mission. When ground control asked him to identify this other station, he provided a call sign that did not exist in any Soviet communication system, accessible since before the facility was constructed. Analysis of the capsule revealed traces of human occupation and evidence that its systems had been operated for extended periods. The environmental controls showed signs of having maintained life support for weeks or months, and the communication equipment contained stored data that appeared to include conversations and technical exchanges that had never been recorded by official monitoring systems. The discovery was classified immediately, and the sealed chamber was filled with concrete to prevent further access. Official reports stated that the chamber had contained obsolete equipment from early facility construction, but personnel involved in the discovery were reassigned to other duties and instructed not to discuss their findings. The duplicate capsule was transported to the same Moscow research facility that had analyzed the sealed room equipment, where it underwent intensive examination by teams of specialists in aerospace engineering, electronics, and materials science. The results of this analysis were never released, but the project consumed significant resources and involved personnel from multiple scientific institutions across the Soviet Union. As the analysis proceeded, it became clear that the duplicate capsule represented technical capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the development of Soviet space technology. The materials and construction methods showed evidence of manufacturing processes that should not have existed in the late 1950s, and the electronic systems incorporated principles that were only beginning to be understood in contemporary research. Most troubling was the discovery that the capsule's communication systems had been designed to interface with equipment and procedures that had never been part of official space program protocols. The systems appeared to be configured for types of missions and operational requirements that had never been publicly acknowledged, suggesting that the Cosmonaut Zero flight had been part of a much larger program that remained hidden from view. The implications of these discoveries prompted a comprehensive review of Soviet space program history, conducted by a special commission with access to the highest levels of classified information. The commission was tasked with determining the scope and objectives of any unauthorized programs that might have operated within or alongside official space activities. However, the Commission's work was complicated by the systematic destruction of documentation that had occurred over the decades following the original incident. Most of the personnel who might have had relevant knowledge were no longer available for questioning, and the physical evidence was fragmentary and difficult to interpret without proper context. The Commission's final report concluded that there was evidence of significant unauthorized activity within the early space program, but that the scope and objectives of this activity could not be determined from available information. The report recommended enhanced security procedures for future operations and the implementation of comprehensive monitoring systems to detect any similar unauthorized activities. These recommendations were implemented gradually over the following years, as the Soviet space program entered a period of transition toward greater transparency and international cooperation. The culture of compartmentalization and secrecy that had characterized earlier decades was replaced by more open communication and collaborative decision-making processes. However, the legacy of the Cosmonaut Zero incident remained embedded in the institutional memory of the space program, influencing approaches to problem-solving and mission planning in subtle but persistent ways. Engineers and cosmonauts continued to experience phenomena that suggested sources of knowledge and capability beyond conventional understanding. But these experiences were integrated into normal operations rather than treated as anomalies requiring investigation. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet space program had established a remarkable record of achievement while operating within a framework that acknowledged the existence of factors beyond rational control. This approach had proven successful in accomplishing ambitious technical goals, but it also created an ongoing tension between public narratives of scientific rationality and private recognition of unexplained influences on program operations. The story of Cosmonaut Zero had become a foundational myth within the space program, representing both the potential and the dangers of pushing human capability beyond established limits. While the specific details of the incident were known only to a few individuals with the highest security clearances, its influence shaped the culture and procedures of space exploration for generations of engineers and cosmonauts. The final official reference to the Cosmonaut Zero case appeared in a classified summary of space program history prepared for senior government officials in 1987. The summary acknowledged that significant unexplained events had occurred during the early development of Soviet space capabilities, but concluded that these events had not compromised the security or effectiveness of subsequent operations. The summary recommended that historical research into these events be discontinued, as the practical benefits of understanding them were outweighed by the security risks of continued investigation. This recommendation was accepted, and the remaining classified files related to the case were transferred to long-term archive storage, where they would remain sealed indefinitely. As the Soviet Union entered its final years, the space program continued to operate successfully, while carrying the unresolved questions and unexplained capabilities that had emerged from its earliest experiments. The Cosmonaut Zero incident had demonstrated that human exploration of space involved factors that transcended conventional understanding of technology and consciousness. But it had also shown that these factors could be accommodated within practical operational frameworks. The true significance of the incident remained a matter of speculation for the few individuals who maintained awareness of its details. Some concluded that it represented evidence of technical capabilities that had been deliberately concealed for security reasons, while others believed it indicated contact with sources of knowledge that existed beyond current human understanding. Regardless of its ultimate explanation, the Cosmonaut Zero case had established that space exploration was a fundamentally transformative activity that changed not only human technical capability, but also human consciousness itself. The individuals who had participated in or witnessed the incident carried this understanding with them as they continued their work, influencing the development of space technology and human space capability in ways that were never fully documented or acknowledged. In 1989, as political changes transformed the Soviet Union and opened previously classified aspects of government activity to public scrutiny, there was brief consideration of declassifying some historical space program documents. However, the Cosmonaut Zero files remained sealed, as officials concluded that their release would raise more questions than could be satisfactorily answered without access to personnel and documentation that were no longer available. The incident thus passed into unofficial history, remembered by a shrinking number of individuals who had been personally involved or who had access to fragmentary documentation. Their accounts, when they were shared at all, were typically dismissed as Cold War mythology or the psychological effects of working under extreme secrecy and pressure. Yet the influence of the case continued to manifest in the ongoing development of space exploration technology and human space capability. Engineers working on advanced projects occasionally reported breakthrough insights that seemed to emerge from sources beyond their conscious knowledge, and space missions sometimes succeeded through decisions and actions that could not be fully explained through rational analysis. These phenomena were gradually accepted as normal aspects of working at the frontiers of human capability, representing the natural emergence of intuitive knowledge and exceptional performance under extreme conditions. The space community developed informal protocols for recognizing and utilizing these capabilities while maintaining operational effectiveness and psychological stability. As the 20th century drew to a close, the legacy of the Cosmonaut Zero incident had become integrated into the fundamental culture of space exploration, influencing approaches to technical innovation and human performance that were applied throughout the international space community. The specific details of the case remained hidden, but its impact continued to shape the development of human space capability in ways that were both profound and invisible. The story of Cosmonaut Zero stands as a reminder that human exploration of space involves not only the conquest of physical challenges, but also the encounter with aspects of existence that transcend conventional understanding. The individuals who participated in this exploration carried the responsibility of integrating these encounters into practical frameworks that enabled continued progress while preserving human safety and psychological stability. Today, decades after the original incident, the questions raised by the Cosmonaut Zero case remain unresolved. The advancement of space technology and human space capability continues to reveal phenomena that challenge established assumptions about the nature of consciousness, knowledge, and human potential. The incident serves as both a warning about the risks of pushing beyond established limits and an inspiration for the transformative possibilities that emerge when human beings venture into the unknown territories of space and consciousness. The silence that was imposed on the Cosmonaut Zero case was intended to protect the security and effectiveness of space exploration programs. But it also preserved the mystery that lies at the heart of human engagement with the cosmos. That mystery continues to influence the development of space technology and human space capability, representing both the greatest challenge and the ultimate promise of humanity's venture into the infinite darkness beyond our world.